welcome back for another episode. CRM Radio, live. Taking a look at the ever-changing CRM space. With the man who's always adapting, but always there, Paul Petersen. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, I'm adaptable, if not flexible.
Well, your next guest, I get a chance to talk to him for a couple of minutes before the show starts here, and usually people are a little nervous, a little distracted. I have to kind of, focus them, pump them up. This guy, I had to bring him down. This guy's ready to roar today here.
After I talked with him a little bit and did some of the research, strange song popped into mind, a song that happens to be by the Monkees, called Salesman. And I remembered that was probably my first exposure to it. We couldn't play it for fair use, but that's a great way to start out. Keenan is with us today, and he's the sales guy at saleguy.com and the author of a book released in December, Gap Selling. Keenan, welcome.
What's up, my man? Thank you for having me. And no, I'm not too young. I used to watch the Monkees on TV.
They had a great show, and the song Salesman came on an album where they actually played their instruments for among the first time. They'd been had a lot of stand-ins and were mostly TV. So for whatever reason, it was a favorite album of mine. I was going to segue before we get into talking a little bit about the book. I had a couple of questions to warm us up, and I was going to ask you, in your travels, what is your favorite sales movie? Do you have one?
Wow. This is good. So like anything I do, it's not very simple. So there's no simple answer. So the first simple answer is, from a sales professional perspective, I don't like any sales movies. I think they give selling a bad name. Nobody knows how to sell. They're doing a shitty job. And it just perpetuates the negative stereotype of selling. From an entertainment perspective, I thought Tin Men was freaking hilarious, and I enjoyed that movie with Danny DeVito. But if I were to be forced to answer the question from, are there any good sales movies that in many ways represent good selling? And I would say it's Will Smith and
Happiness.
Pursuit of Happiness.
Pursuit of Happiness. Yeah.
There's a good example of how to sell. Not in the beginning, but as he tries to connect with the financial house.
And of course, it's a great little study of a salesman selling medical devices and how hard that was. They had to buy the device themselves, try to sell what they had. I'll say door to door, sort of. Everybody goes to.
Yes, and you know what's great about that, and this is why it's actually a great demonstration. What he missed, he even talks about it in the movie. There really was no problem. Boxes, those medical devices he had to buy up front solved. The issue wasn't you had to buy them up front. The issue wasn't you had to hustle. The issue wasn't that all the other stuff that goes with selling. The issue was he never recognized in the beginning that the problem that those medical devices solved wasn't a prolific problem with his buyers.
Which are primarily doctors, right?
Yes, primarily doctors. So when he went in to sell it, there wasn't a reason for most of them to buy, not because the product didn't have features or wasn't expensive or couldn't do what it did well, but it couldn't solve the problems of the majority of his target market. So no one needed it.
And I think that sort of starts into your book, the latest book, Gap Selling. Part of that gap is what is the buyer experiencing when you approach them, right? And trying to find that pain. So, what's the? I guess we could get into the gap. What is the gap, and how do you close it? No pun intended. But yeah, part of the gap is identifying what that pain is. Because I was talking last week with our guest, and I sold consulting for Arthur Young, one of the big eight at the time, and my partner said, Paul, there are 3 things about marketing and sales you need to know: fear, sex, and greed. And he said, now go off and make it happen, right? But he hit on all the emotional aspects of getting in front of a client. Are they afraid of losing their job? Are they afraid of poor implementation of the service that we might have provided? Things of that sort. In your travels, you started out selling in the 90s memberships to, I believe, the Chamber of Commerce and then major technology. But when did you learn about this flip from it? It's not about me telling you something. It's about me learning something. When did you come to that epiphany?
I don't think there was an epiphany. It just happened over the years. I'm sure at some point in time, I started to realize that I was going to be more successful doing it, but didn't know I was doing it, right? So it was, what is that term? Competently incompetent or something like that, or incompetently competent or something, right? So I don't think I really knew what I was doing. And then as I started managing sales teams, I started, getting a better understanding. And it's not even a thing. The culmination of 15 or 20 years of selling and then being aware, and then finally being aware enough to start putting names to it, to start writing it down, to start being very conscious of what it was. It's interesting, your boss, manager, the first guy who sent you out, he sent you out half prepared. And it's unfortunate. And I'm sure you did well, but he sent you out half prepared. Because when he talked about those things, and as you described them, someone's afraid of losing their job, they're afraid of this, they're afraid of that. Fear comes from the pain side of the equation, right? And people move away from pain and they work towards pleasure. And so if you can't understand what the pleasure side of the equation is and how they identify the pleasure side of the equation, then you can't use both elements of the psychology of deciding. I mean, that's really all we do. We decide to move towards pleasure and move away from pain. And so the ability to unwrap and unravel both of those and then present them to the customer or to the buyer or to the prospect in a manner that they can live in both and vacillate between both and feel comfortable in both is how you win. And the gap is really the net out. The gap is where the value lives. So when you said a second ago, we're going to shrink the gap. No. We want to do just the opposite as salespeople. We want to expand the gap, because the bigger the gap, the greater the sense of urgency, the more money we'll pay, the greater value it brings to us, the more we want it. The smaller the gap, the more transactional the sale. The gap is the space between where I am today and what I don't like or what I'm unhappy with, the pain, right? And that's driven by problems. And we can talk about that in a bit, because I don't want people to find pain. I want them to find problems. But where I am today, what makes me unhappy? What can't I do? What can't I accomplish? Where can't I go? What's making me uncomfortable? What's making me unhappy? To where can I go tomorrow if I buy your product or your service, or I make an investment, or I make a change? If I change, where can I go tomorrow? The bigger that gap from where I'm sitting today to where I could be sitting tomorrow, the more inclined I'm to move, the more money I'll spend, the harder I'll work to get there.
The one concept in the chapter, the difference between a need and a pain, and I think many salespeople will take a need and, like a fish, bobber, and run with it, when they actually need to probe a little bit beneath the surface, right?
Yeah, they need to slow down. So there's a whole bunch of myths that we've been taught for the last 25, 30, 35 years that we as salespeople are killing us. And one of them is that we sell to needs. Please do not sell to need. And here's the problem. The need suggests the customer knows what they want. And sometimes they do, but more often than not, they don't know what they need. And so if you start selling to need, you could sell the wrong thing. You could get down the path and realize that what you sold them isn't really what's going to help them be successful or solve the problem, and it doesn't work, or someone else comes along and helps them understand the real problem. They're like, oh, I didn't need this. I needed this over here, and they buy that instead. And you might have been able to sell it to them, but you were too busy chasing the need. Never sell the need. Customers don't know what they want half the time, and I never trust a customer when they tell me what they want.
One aspect of that is when you talk about selling face-to-face or over the phone or whatever with one person, but when you move to a corporate, often you have to deal with 3 different people, and they may all have slightly different views of that pain and or individual pain, right? That's unique to them. The purchasing guy may be worried about getting it through without board approval. The ultimate end user has to worry about implementation, and the boss may have to worry about budget, right? So the salesperson has to pull multiple influences on their sale, right?
Yes. Notice the 3 examples you gave. We're going to test my memory. One person was worried about implementation. One person was worried about, was it budget?
Yeah, budget and or having to go before the board or.
Yes, going before the board, worried about implementation, worried about budget. Think about all 3 of those. Those are what I call product-centric issues. They are out of context. So when salespeople sell a product and they're pushing a product and they try to find the pain, in many cases, they're leaving themselves exposed. I say never find the pain, because the pain is a symptom, or the pain can be a symptom of a different problem. Pain cannot exist without problem. At the very core is the problem, right? I mean, we do it with colds, right? The pain is the sneezing, the headache, the cough, the sore throat. So we treat the pain, but we don't ever actually treat the problem because we can't. We don't know how to solve colds, right? But if we did, or we didn't realize that cold was the true problem, we're treating the wrong stuff. So what I say is stop finding pain, stop chasing needs, get to the core problem. So using your example, I'm going to make this up, but let's say the core problem of this company you just fictitiously put out there is that they're unable to deliver their products to certain markets, and they're unable to manufacture their products using a particular material and get it done fast enough. And my product or service actually can facilitate that. So what I want to do is I want to understand the full ramifications of that problem. Why can't you manufacture it like you want? Why can't you manufacture it with the particular product I use? Why can't you ship it to these type of places? What's the impact? Oh, you're losing to the competition. How much are you losing to the competition? When did this start? How come the competition can do it because of you? What other products do you have? What percentage of revenue is it? How much is revenue going down? I want to know all this stuff. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to sell you my product. So when you say budget, you're trying to get budget. No. What do you mean you're trying to get budget? You told me you're losing $50 million a year. My thing only costs $25,000 a year. Why? What do you mean you can't get budget? Right? And then the person says, I'm worried about implementation. Well, why are you worried about implementation? You just told me that you can't manufacture using this particular resin or whatever, and therefore you can't meet your demands, and your competitors taking your business, and you want to talk to me about implementation? You see what I'm doing? And then if you go to the board, here, let me give you, you're not going to go to the board and say, we want to buy this freaking Keenan manufacturing process. You want to go to the board and say, we found a way to finally ship to where we need to ship it and build it fast enough using the resin we couldn't use before. This should allow us to chip away at the competition's movement. Boom. That's what we do.
Do we think, our customers or prospective buyers, do you think they're receptive to this? I always found that with a few open-ended type questions at the beginning, you can start to sense how much detail they want to get into, what they want to talk about. But what suggestion do you have to approach a new prospect to get that discussion or diagnosis going?
You have to know what problems you're looking for. The problem with many salespeople and many sales organizations and many sales trainings is that they just say, ask open-ended questions, or they just tell people do a discovery, but don't actually tell them what they're looking for. And in many cases, I just listened to one not even 20 minutes ago, and the kid was looking to hear the person say, well, we don't have this product, or we don't do this process. And so because of that, he heard them say, oh, we don't do this process. Well, we do it. Let me show you how we do it. No, you don't go looking for that. You got to go looking for the problem. So if you know what problems your product or service solves and the impact those problems can have on your clients or your customers, you go right for those. So you might say, using the cheesy example I've opened the door on, you might say, Chad, thanks for taking 2 minutes of my time. Listen, I understand you do this. Do you guys find it difficult, or have you figured out a way to manufacture your widget using this type of resin and plastic? And if not, has it really impacted your ability to compete with the competition, understanding the market's moving in that direction?
It is incumbent upon salespeople to not only know their product or service that they're selling, but to understand how customers have used it. I talked to a CFO. She was saying that we have 4 or 5 big customers, and so I've been pressing sales to win me more. And I said, well, do you know why they bought? Because that will be the key, is to identifying whether that's going to work in other places or not. And she didn't know. And I think, Paul, we're on a break and pay a few bills. And then we'll come back and we'll talk with Keenan, author of Gap Selling, and we'll try to break this down into some very specific tips, delivered very forcefully.
We know you rely on your CRM system, and it's usually a love-hate relationship. Most CRM systems, well, let's face it, they're expensive. They're hard to understand. People don't use them properly. And you're probably paying for features that you don't even want. If that's your case, then maybe it's time to simplify. It's time to get more from your CRM. Why don't you go back to the original? Trust Goldmine. We helped pioneer the industry, after all. Goldmine CRM is, well, it's simple, it's affordable, and it's proven. If all those sound appealing to you, if you're just tired of the CRM headaches that you're getting from trying to implement something that's just too complicated, too expensive, and too much for you to figure out, then why not go back to the original? Visit Goldmine today, goldmine.com. All right, let's pick it back up with Paul and his very, very shy guest here.
Keenan, don't hold back. Tell us how you really feel. But was there any particular sales methodology that influenced you in your career? And what is the role of those methodologies today?
No, there wasn't one. There's a term. So I remember in my very, very, very first sales job, I don't know, it was 2 months in, 3 months in, 6 months in. I only worked there a year, so it wasn't that long. My sales manager said, "How did you learn consultative sell?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he goes, "Your style is a consultative selling." Okay. I just looked at it. I've never heard this before. I don't know what you're talking about. So somewhere along the line, it was innate to me. And then after that, I mean, I read all kinds of different sales books and stuff.
Well, there was a book Mark Hannon wrote, Consultative Selling, and it was heavy on ROI based. That if you asked the right questions, you could propose things, you would get numerics, and could help the customer build a benefit analysis. So then there's strategic selling, of course. Spin selling was a big one for me because it got you into asking questions, and I was curious by nature, so I found that to be it wasn't so much a methodology of, you're in step 1, 3, or 4, but it was more to, how to collect information from the client. And that was an eye opener to me as opposed to reading off your spec sheet.
Yes. So I think there's a whole bunch of books and stuff I read that helped shape or tap me in a certain direction. I think somewhere along the line I learned, and I want to say it was long before I started professionally selling, I learned that selling is about influencing. I learned that. And I had a whole bunch of stories I tell in my childhood. I had to convince people not to do something to me or for me or whatever, whether it was getting in trouble or getting kicked out of school or whatever, whatever it was. It let me into the bar, whatever. And I quickly learned that it wasn't about me. Like, I had to understand them and where they were coming from and what was in it for them, because they weren't going to do it otherwise. And so I think that was innate to me. And I just transferred that into selling and then built it, expanded upon it, and created a methodology out of it.
Gotcha. I mean, there's a little bit of everybody's always selling something is something my father used to share with me. Do you think salesmen are born, or can they be developed?
Oh, absolutely, they can be developed. No, I think like anything else, some salespeople are born with better skills for selling than others. Some people are better athletes than others. Look at Larry Bird. Okay, he was not the fastest guy in the world, not the strongest guy in the world, but man, he became a great basketball player because he mastered the fundamentals. Some people have a propensity to sell, but you can absolutely build sellers and create sellers. Absolutely.
One of the other aspects of the gap, and I saw this, it was just a mention in one paragraph where I think we were talking about the difficulties of sales, but you mentioned sort of managers setting poor quotas. In gap selling, where you have an individual sales rep who's got to get to that problem and diagnose that pain and then start to become suggestive, is if I were to summarize. But what role should sales managers play in helping their team get this way? And you manage a very large organization where sometimes you get a little bit above the fray, and it's organizational, and it's talking to the board about the forecast and whatnot. But what tips do you have for sales managers today to help their teams develop and get up to speed?
So the one thing that I say, it's really not one thing, but the one thing I emphasize is that if you're going to be a sales manager and you want a gap seller, you want your people to be better sellers, you need to hold them to account for the information they get from a customer. Notice that not many sales managers sit and say, okay, most of them sit around and say, okay, tell me, is this going to close? And they say, yes. You say, why? And they tell you why, and you guys debate back and forth. What I say, no. I want you to ask them what information you got. So what I say is, when someone says, hey, here's the deal, it's going to close on, I don't know, in 2 weeks or 2 months, whatever, I'm like, okay, great. Why do they want to buy? And they'll give you some stupid answer, but I'm like, all right, let's go further. What problem are they trying to solve? And it better be a real life problem. The problem isn't, well, they said they need a new, CRM. No, that's not what I asked you. I said, what problem are they trying to solve? And they say, well, they can't forecast. No. That's still not a problem. It doesn't, just because you can't forecast doesn't mean it's a problem.
Yeah, right. What pain is that causing in the organization? They've missed manufacturing targets, or
thank you, exactly. Yes. So I force sales managers to get to the problem. When they finally get to the problem, then I say, great, what's the current impact to the organization? And I force them to walk through the impact. And it's got to be more than one. I want a bunch of impacts. So then they go through all these different impacts, right? And it's causing them this, it's causing them that. They're losing this, they're losing that, blah, blah, blah. I say, great. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So where do they want to go? What are they trying to achieve? And they'll say, let's just say they're losing, they're losing $10 million a year, or they're only growing at 5%, and they want to go at 30%. Let's go with that. I'm like, great. What does that represent? Well, right now they're at 100 million. They want to get to 150 million. They want to get it to by 2020, and right now they're only going at 5 million a year, so they're never going to get this. So the gap is 20 million. They're going at 5 million a year. That's 10 million. In 2 years, they'll be at 110. They need to be at 150. So I guess that's bad math. That's $40 million. So the gap is $40 million. So you have $40 million riding on this. See what I've just done right there? That's right. The gap. That's what you're selling now. You're not selling the 150 and you're not selling the 110. You're selling the 40. You're selling the difference between where they are and where they could be. And they can't get there without this.
I think you used the example of how much would you pay for an aspirin? $50, $1 million, and it says, well, if you're just having a headache, $50 is a little high, but if you have, a head trauma, $1 million is, right where you need to be.
If the aspirin is going to solve the head trauma or keep you from dying, you're going to pay $1 million, right? So it's not the aspirin we're buying, and it's not the headache that we're curing. It's the outcome. It's the space between where I am today and tomorrow. I'm a 34-year-old man. I've got 2 kids that are under 6. I'm happily married. I've got a great job that pays me $250K a year. I've got a beautiful house in the suburbs. And I've just told I got brain cancer. I will pay $1 million for your pill to make it go away. Right? And same head, same pill, same brain cancer, but I'm 99 living in a nursing home. My kids don't come to see me but once every 18 months. I haven't seen my grandkids in 5 years. I have to drink through a straw, and I play freaking canasta all day long. I'm not going to pay you $1 million. And this is what salespeople miss. This is the best example right there, my man. Every salesperson thinks, oh, he's going to die, and he's got a head trauma, or he's got brain cancer. Oh, my God, you got to buy this. It's the greatest deal in the world. No, it's not. Get to the problem. He doesn't have a very big problem. And the first one, the gap is pretty big, isn't it?
Yes.
And the second one, same problem, same solution, same pill, same everything, but the impact isn't very big, is it?
No, and I think
it's a small gap.
And you used I think the other example was to somebody buying a house. If you're young and a family, the new house is very exciting. We're moving on, and if you're an older person retiring, it's a sense of loss. So there's same transaction, but very different viewpoints to that. I think in gap selling, you talk about the emotion, you talk about the pain.
We got to get away from the pain. Sorry to interrupt, but we have to stop saying the pain. The pain is a result of the problem. You see what I'm saying? So
yes.
We got to say problem.
Yes.
We got to find the problem. But sorry, keep going.
And then I think the idea of making sure, probing a little bit about what do you know. I remembered once an enterprise sale I was running, and my boss said, well, who's going to be the major influencer? And I opened up my folder and I said, well, I know 8 people in the account. They're all influencers. They're all going to, we got to where we went, but it was more about the depth of your understanding of the account. So any final thoughts as we wrap up here, Keenan?
Yeah, I think, look, if you want to be a good salesperson, don't overcomplicate it. Get really good at understanding the problem or set of problems that your buyers and prospects are dealing with and how those problems affect their ability to be successful. And if you can assess that and quantify those, then you are going to be wildly successful, because then you'll know if it's worth buying your product. You'll know when they should buy your product. You'll know what happens if they don't buy your product. But if you can't quantify the gap, then you are no longer influencing the sale, and you are simply an order taker. Because when someone says to you, oh, I can't buy it because you're missing this feature, and you don't understand the problem they're trying to solve, which means then you don't understand how that feature impacts or doesn't impact the outcome, you're forced to just relegate to saying, well, yeah, but it does this and this and this and this. You can't look at them and say, wait a minute, I'm confused. You told me that you were trying to accomplish A, B, and C, and I appreciate this feature is a nice feature, but it doesn't impact the desired outcome, or the impact to your desired outcome is minimal. Why does this matter?
Great. Well, that emphatically starts where we need to start. We're going to stop here, and I recommend the gap selling at salesguy.com for more information. Keenan, thanks so much for joining us, and Paul, surf's up.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to another episode of CRM Radio Live on the Funnel Radio channel for at-work listeners like you.